in the decades following the Apollo missions and lunar. The moon kept its secrets until humanity has turned its gaze to others' worlds. And then, as if overnight, the moon race is back. New rockets SpaceX took to the skies. NASA has developed Artemis program, and China quietly set off where no human foot has ever set foot. Rumors began to spread about strange discovery on the far side of the moon. What was actually found under the moonlight dust, and why everyone comes back again there? To start, let's give a little context. China's lunar program started relatively recently in 2004 and had an ambitious phased plan. Chinese National Space Administration launched a series orbiters and landers, Chan modules, named after the goddess Months, to systematically explore our nearest celestial neighbor. Their goals combined science and strategy, which contributed to China's growth as a space power state. Chang'e 1, launched in 2007, became the first Chinese lunar orbiter. He created a three-dimensional map of the lunar surface and analyzed soil composition. It is especially important that Chang'e Il-1 instruments detected traces of helium-3 in the regolith. This was the first hint of China's resource ambitions. In 2010, it was the next orbiter was launched with high-resolution Chan-2 cameras. He was researching potential landing sites. For future missions, flying through everything 15 kilometers above the surface to take pictures of the landing zones and check the safety of the terrain. Already, after 3 years, China achieved its first soft moon landing. Spacecraft made a landing on the visible side at Sea Rains and deployed the U-2 rover translated as the Jade Rabbit. It was first moon landing since 1976 year. It ended a decade silence. U-2 traveled in grey across the plains for the first time in history, delivering ultraviolet telescope on the surface moon, thus creating the first lunar observatory. In 2019, there was Chan-4, a mission that was supposed to enter into history. It was originally created as reserve for CHE-3, but later it repurposed for an expedition to the far side of the moon. The goal was to become the first spacecraft that ever landed there. Achievements which no other has been able to achieve nation. Methodological program of China demonstrated not only technological skill, but also geopolitical ambitions. China National Space Administration, which directly controls the military department, pursued a dual purpose: scientific discovery and strategic prestige. Some analysts believe that the main driver Chinese interest is the desire to strategically important resources that actually marks the beginning of a new energy race to the moon. Others in words, beyond national pride, the key motivation is the untouchables, the riches of our satellite, metals, water, and nuclear fuel. So January 3rd, 2019, the Chang'e 4 spacecraft descended into an alien world night of the far side of the moon and accomplished soft landing in the von Karman crater. The crater is located within a colossal South Pole Aitken Basin, one of the largest impact structures in solar system. The value of the inverse side of the moon is huge. It always turned away from the Earth, hidden from our radio noise, and remained unexplored previous missions. Scientists have long sought to explore its ancient relief and pristine radio environment. But the difficulties were enormous. Since the thickness of the moon blocks direct communication with Earth, no probe could transmit data without repeater. China proposed an elegant solution: Special Companion Chiwo, in translation, Magpie Bridge. In May 2018, Chiwo placed at the Lagrange point of the Earth the moon behind the moon, so that it has constant direct connection, like with Earth and with the far side of the moon. The communication bridge was critically important. From the very beginning of the decline, Chang'e 4, above the surface, all landing commands were transmitted through Chiuyao, and immediately after landing, the probe contacted the ground, precisely through this channel. However, the landing remained in complete radio silence, the perfect environment for new experiments. Here, Chain 4 landed Yutu, 2 lunar rover in the Jade translation, Rabbit, 2, who went out into the grey dust because 12 hours after landing. This was the first in human history event, an impressive achievement that even the boss praised NASA Jim Bryden, and American scientists celebrated this success. On the other hand, Yutu too took pictures of the landscape, which no human being has ever seen before close up, a bumpy plain under the black sky. Geology of the reverse side has interested researchers. It does not have dark lava seas that dominate the visible side. Instead, the bark is covered craters. By exploring it, the probe could finally help answer the old question, the question of why both sides of the moon so different. Thus began the missions that revealed, or rather sealed, a multitude of discoveries from exotic materials to hints at resources that can serve fuel for future colonies. However, these discoveries are caused not only by research curiosity, but also give answers to many old questions. And the isotope tops this list, of course. Helium-3 is a real treasure in moon dust and one of the most discussed resources month. On Earth, helium-3 occurs rare, but in lunar soil it is plenty. It settled there for centuries along with the solar wind. Theoretically, helium-3 could power reactors' nuclear fusion, providing clean energy on a huge scale. Chinese scholars emphasize this potential. In 2020, among the samples returned by the Chang'e 5 mission, was a new mineral Chang'e Y was discovered, which interestingly contains traces of helium-3. Its appeal is striking. Total 41.3 helium can give the same amount of energy than 5,000 tons of coal. Estimates indicate that there may be more than in the lunar regolith 1 million tons of helium-3, and that's enough to provide the Earth with energy for thousands of years. It is not surprising that Chinese orbital vehicles and rovers from the very beginning map the distribution of helium-3 and analyze lunar soil. This valuable gas may become the gold of the future lunar fevers, and Chain's missions are effective scouts who investigate the most promising areas. However, not all discoveries were so predictable. In mid-2019, lunar rover operators, the two of them, noticed something unusual in one of the small craters, shining a textured area that was different from the surrounding soil. Discovery mysterious gel caused a storm in internet. What can be sticky or liquid on an airless moon? Volcanic glass, molten meteorite, and maybe something even stranger. First, the Chinese officials refrained from publishing photos, which only added fuel to the fire of speculation. But when the pictures were made public, they showed brilliant dark matter that has accumulated between dust and stones. Scientists who analyzed the spectrum of the substance identified it as breccia, soil, and rock, melted as a result of a meteorite impact. In other words, the area of the vitreous lunar rock, probably rich in minerals such as olivine and pyroxene, melted and turned into a smooth mass. This is, of course, not alien slime, but still a fascinating discovery. The substance resembled molten samples regolith from the Apollo mission, but was discovered in a completely new region. The shiny spot told about high-energy collisions that formed the dark side of the moon. Along with all this, amidst the grey wasteland of Chang'e, 4 also carried a miniature biosphere experiment, hermetic, a bucket-sized container that contained soil, seeds, and insect eggs. In January, in 2019, mission scientists reported sensational news. Cotton seeds sprouted inside the container on months. This news was accompanied by a photograph of a tender green shoot, which sprouted under the influence of the moon gravity. This was the first in history humanity is a plant that has sprouted on another celestial body, a symbolic view of the future towards interplanetary greenhouses. However, the plant did not live long. A week after landing, a moonlit night came, and the temperature inside the container dropped to -62 degrees. Without sunlight and after power off heaters, the sprout died, as did expected. But in these few days, he proved that earthly life could begin even in such distant and hostile conditions. Other seeds, potatoes, yeast and eggs, fruit flies, were also placed in biosphere in an attempt to create a miniature ecosystem. And although they didn't have time to germinate or hatch before the onset cold, this experiment became an important milestone in astrobiology. He demonstrated that astronauts of one will be able to grow food for months in a day, and this is a necessary step towards creating long-term, monthly bases. As one of the scientists said, this is the first once when humanity conducted a biological surface cultivation experiment. Moon, a tiny green leaf on lifeless grey world, became powerful, a symbol of future opportunities. News about China's further progress on the moon quickly spread through scientific circles around the world, causing a wave of hypotheses, from in-depth discussions to wild conspiracy theories. There are many in the West. Researchers are welcomed by technical advances, China, and its relentless pursuit of data collection. NASA, although prohibited by US law to officially cooperate with China, still exchanged some monthly data and expressed congratulations. Scientists were eagerly waiting results of the work of Chang'e 4 in the field of lunar geology, and some even started consider the potential of a third party to cooperation. Landing on the backside month was recognized as an extension human knowledge about the satellite. Will it be able to China to gain advantage in opening resources or the installation of telescopes protected from terrestrial radio interference? Similar questions have sparked discussion at conferences and in political circles. At the same time, the secrecy of the mission and the mystery of the far side of the moon have given rise to less well-founded assumptions. Theories of language flourished in internet forums and headlines tabloids. Some suggested that Chang'e 4I stumbled upon something real, impressive, perhaps evidence of the existence alien artifacts or ancient structures hidden from the human eye. When did the first reports of gel-like substance before publication, any images? External commentators began to speculate wildly, from living organisms to secret bases. Similarly, in 2021, the rover noticed a cube-shaped object on the horizon, a silhouette that was quickly dubbed the mysterious hut. For several weeks, the internet was buzzing with jokes and theories. The rover discovered a monolith or an alien. The rover team picked up on the joke, calling the object a mysterious house, but did not make any extraordinary statements. As U2 approached during the few lunar days, the truth became obvious. The pile turned out to be just a stone of bizarre shape lying on the edge crater. In fact, it resembled a sitting rabbit, which is very appropriate, because the name U2 translates as jade, rabbit. In addition to the alien theme, there are more strategic and plausible theories. Observers note that the Chinese space program has military ties, which causes concerns about possible hidden goals on the back. Some suggests that the base may be there used to conceal activity, or even as an observation point or missile launch detection, protected of the Earth's influence. However, there is no evidence that Chang'e 4 was carrying something other than scientific instruments. Its usefulness, the load was openly published and even included contributions from Europe, in particular a neutron detector from Sweden and radiation experiment from Germany. However, the time and focus of the Chinese efforts just when the United States America and other countries too they returned for a month, fed talk of a new space race. Now we understand what was discovered on the far side of the moon, and this discovery changes the future plans not only of China, but also of all countries exploring space. Discoveries and lessons learned during Chang'e missions have several important consequences. First of all, this is real possibility of creating a monthly database. The success of the program paves the way for building a research base on the moon, perhaps on its reverse side. If people will set up camp there, they will be able to take advantage of the unprecedented astronomical radio silence. This will allow listen to the universe without Earth's interference. However, the far side of the moon also means constant isolation in communication. Future bases will likely depend on satellites of repeaters, similar to Q. China is already planning to build robotic research station during this decade, perhaps with using 3D printing for construction structures made of lunar soil. Reverse side is no longer out of reach, so one day we can see there residential modules or observatories built in places forever hidden from view Earth. In addition, confirmed deposits helium-3 and other mineral finds increase the chances of extracting useful fossils on the moon. If helium-3 will be extracted in significant volumes, this may revolutionize energy production on Earth. Chinese scientists estimate that million tons of lunar helium-3 can meet the Earth's energy needs on 10,000 years, which could, in fact, solve global energy and climate problems. Although it is quite speculative forecast and unlikely will be realized in the coming decades, the race for helium-3 has already become part of geopolitical strategy. A country that will be the first to develop effective technologies, helium production 3 per month, will receive a colossal strategic advantage in energy. Chinese lunar missions lay the foundation for assessment practicality of extraction. In particular, experiments have determined the optimal methods heating lunar soil for helium release 3. Program expected support organizations such as Atomic Energy Administration. Moon could well become the Persian Gulf 20th century. Although the missions launched landed far from the poles, their results related to a broader search water ice. In recent years, numerous missions such as NASA Elkrus and Indian Chandrayaan-1 confirmed the presence of water in the shadowed craters of the Moon, especially in the polar regions. Water has enormous value. It can to ensure the lives of astronauts and split into hydrogen and oxygen for rocket fuel. Chinese leadership drew attention to this. In the coming years, new boarding passes will be sent devices to polar regions for assessment ice deposits. Soil analysis data from the Chang'e 5 mission even showed the presence of hydroxyl, water, bound in the monthly minerals. And the presence of water and sunlight light allows you to generate energy that makes the creation of a settlement on the moon much more realistic. China's program involves the use of local lunar resources. That is, astronauts will be able to extract ice, melt it for obtaining water, as well as converting it into breathable oxygen and fuel hydrogen. On the other hand, especially in South Pole Aitken Basin region, ice reserves can be found in craters that are constantly in shadows. If this is the case, then the choice to explore this part of the month may be justified, discovering the keys to sustainable living. As a result, the Chinese National Space Administration outlined the roadmap according to which the missions are paving the way for the Creation International Research Station on months with a crew in the 30s. The idea consists in building a base, presumably near the Moon's south pole, in cooperation with other countries. However, one unresolved question remains. Who has lunar resources? Currently, Outer Space Treaty 1967 year prohibits national claims to month. But due to the fact that countries are preparing for resource extraction, new ones may appear on the horizon, international agreements or conflicts. And already now it is clear, the state that leads finding and using monthly materials will have a significant impact on formation of these rules. The Moon became the central arena of the 20th space race century, and this race is unfolding in real time. After launching Chang'e 4, all key players have activated their monthly programs. China, for its part, continues a series of missions, developing your achievements. In 2020, a new generation device returned samples from the visible side of the Moon, in particular, the youngest lunar rocks which ever found, about 2 years old, billion years. And already in 2024, Chang'e 6 started with the return of the first samples from the back. She drilled surface and delivered to the ground about 2 kilograms of lunar soil. These samples are analysed, and they can shed light on the history of the Moon and confirm previous measurements. In the future, missions planned for the 7th and 8th generations for the purpose of research south polar regions of the Moon. There, the goal is not only scientific discoveries, but also, possibly, the start of construction infrastructure. Music. For the lunar base, ILRS, the Chang'e 7 mission has with the aim of searching for water ice and explore the polar environment, probably with the help of a landing gear module, rover, and even a small jumping probe for research craters. Chang'e 8 will test technologies on sample use of resources, on-site in-course utilization, and this mission can be the beginning of the construction of a permanent outpost. By early 2030, the Chinese, the People's Republic, hopes to lay the foundation, the core of the research station in the southern pole of the Moon, open to international partners who are ready to work outside within the framework of an initiative led by United States of America. Meanwhile, the United States has resumed its monthly ambitions through the Artemis program from NASA, which is supported by private companies, including SpaceX and Blue Origin, as well as coalition of allied countries. Purpose Artemis: return the American astronauts to the Moon and create permanent presence in the southern pole of the Moon. There is an unofficial finish line, direct, first manned landing of a new era. It was originally planned for 2020, 4th year, but the Artemis mission 3, which is supposed to deliver astronauts to surface, postponed until 2025 and beyond. Realistically, landing is expected no earlier than 2027. China, for its part, announced about plans to send astronauts to Month by 2030, developing for this new heavy launch vehicle Chang'e 10 with lunar shuttle. These graphs are extremely concise, and it cannot be denied that already there is a quiet competition. In 2024, Chinese officials have directly named it for the first time United States of America, direct rival in the race for the Moon. Impressive recognition. In the strategic report, it is predicted that over the next 20 to 30 years, Chinese ILRS base and base Artemis from the United States of America will operate side by side in the southern pole of the Moon. The scene is already literally prepared in the same place, on illuminated ridges over dark craters filled with water ice. This is a region where both countries hope to plant their flags and build infrastructure. This will likely lead to geopolitical tensions. There are also fears of territorial seizure, not in the usual sense of lands, but strategically important places. Both sides seek to secure the best areas for themselves. Those that have constant sunlight for solar energy and are located next to ice deposits. The question of whose rules will regulate this activity still remains unanswered. This is already not the ruthless race of the 60s, but more a complex combination of cooperation and rivalry. By law, NASA and the Chinese, the National Space Administration does not can cooperate directly. But intermediaries, for example Europe, which has tools on board the Chang'e and at the same time is a partner of Artemida, creating a network indirect interaction. And yet the picture is clear. the space race is back. This time, the moon is the prize found mastery and perhaps resource use. In the 1960s, the race to the moon was a competition to outrun an opponent and leave a mark. In 2020, it is already about to consolidate positions for the future. The most important question might be, will these discoveries be an incentive for cooperation for the benefit of all humanity? Or on the contrary, they will fuel competition, which will divide the lunar sphere. For now, the backside of the moon no longer remains in darkness. It became a testing ground for a new era, when states and even private companies turned their eyes to the surface of the moon as to the new Wild West. And meanwhile, secrets that can determine the future of our planet, quietly waiting for silver ball at the top. Will there be no species?